We're actually going to back up just into verse 33 of 18. So 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 33 reads, "Then the king was deeply moved and went up into the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said thus, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place. O Absalom, my son, my son." And Joab was told, "Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, "The king is grieved for his son." And the people stole back into the city that day, as the people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. The king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son." Obvious need for David to be grieved. It would be cold and callous, wrong for a man to lose his son and not be grieved, regardless of how sinful, how wrong his conduct may have been. Absalom tried to overthrow his father, led an insurrection against David, and tried to take over the kingdom. Obviously, that was not just a great offense to David when you really have it in your heart that God has established the kingdom of Israel and that David is the anointed king of the Lord. Absalom is opposed to God in that move, and clearly sinful, wrong act on Absalom's part, but it doesn't remove the loss for David in this moment. And I try to, help especially parents to understand that when a child is prodigal, sinful, working against God in their life, they have that dual attitude of they love the child and they're grieved by it, but they're offended at the same time. And in that, the child is living a very sinful life, something that's opposed to God's working in their heart. That's tough. That's really tough. And whenever those individuals get into trouble, get hurt, and there are even those that die in those occasions, it doesn't remove the pain. There's Christianity is not cold and callous. There are those that in false religions have made it that way. If a person leaves out of cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses, if somebody passes away, very often there is just a cold attitude within that they died outside the kingdom in the mind of those cults. They look as though they're the only way, and anyone outside it is just automatically to be forgotten and written off. That's not the attitude of the Lord. It's not his heart. When he records that God is patient, not willing that any would perish, but that all would come to repentance. That's the mind of God. He wants everyone to believe in him. And I would tell you to guard yourself against any doctrine that would give you a cold and impersonal reflection of God. And that includes belief systems like Calvinism that teach in its most rigid ways, in its most rigid churches. The doctrine teaches that God predestined certain people to be saved and certain people to be unsaved, and that basically all he's interested in are those that are going to be saved. That's who he loves and who his compassion is, felt towards. This cold, uncaring God that doesn't care that there's a whole bunch of people going to hell. That is not the God you see of the Scriptures. I mean, John 3:16 is the whole of the gospel. For God so loved the world. If it was predestination and the elect only, then that verse would have said that. For God so loved the elect that he gave his only begotten Son, that the elect would be saved. It's not what it says. It says whosoever. Whosoever would embrace him. God's heart is that all of the world would be saved. And when you start taking those black and white, cold, impersonal approaches, you lose a lot of the character of God within that. David here is deeply grieved over the loss of his son. And he actually has to be corrected in verse 5. Then Joab came into the house of the king and said, "Today you have disgraced all your servants who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither prince nor servants. For today I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died today, then it would have pleased you well. Now therefore, arise, go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. And that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now." Then the king arose and sat in the gate. And they told all the people, saying, "There is the king sitting in the gate." So all the people came before the king, for everyone of Israel had fled to his tent. They had snuck back in. When it describes earlier that they snuck back into the city like someone that would sneak away in battle, you can see the shame in what's being said. If there's a battle going on and there's a war being waged against your city, it's your responsibility to defend. You should be going into the battle. Anyone who's looking for a hole in the wall to sneak out and get away is a traitor to the city. He's a man who's betraying everyone and abandoning the cause. And that's how these people had to sneak back in. The tables had been so turned. They're all in war in defense of themselves against Absalom. Absalom falls, and now the king is disheartened. And the confusion spreads, and everybody's just having to sneak around in this skulking attitude. They can't rejoice in the victory that they've just had. It's right, it's confusing, and that's the way these sorts of things go. David has to go down and sit and tell the people, no, what has been done was right. This thing was supposed to happen this way. It was necessary. And he begins to comfort the people that way. In verse 9, we read, "Now all the people were in dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, 'The king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?'" So they all know David has left. They all know David fled the land. They all know that Absalom, the one who led this rebellion, is now dead. And their concern is, basically, we don't have any leadership. The whole thing has fallen apart, and chaos is going to ensue. And it's already begun. And you'll see here briefly that whatever happens in these situations, whenever these situations occur, someone's going to rise up and take control. And so it's very necessary that someone of good report step in, because what you're going to find is anybody with ambition enough will try to fill the gap. Men always want to be followed. They always want to be elevated into a position of power. And whenever there's a lack of leadership, guidance, and power, the worst elements are going to rise to the top. This is basically how I ran every classroom I was in from the time I was in 6th grade until I finally dropped out of high school. If there was a lack of leadership, I took over. That's the way it was. Substitute teachers were fair game, man. They were just that. I was that kid. There was an occasion in 7th grade where they brought in a substitute teacher. Our teacher was going to be gone, suddenly ill, going to be gone for days. Brought in a substitute teacher. I had her out of the classroom in 4 hours. In 4 hours. And they had another teacher from the school in place. And they had another substitute teacher in that classroom the next morning. And 2 hours into the day, I was alone in an office with that substitute teacher and the principal getting read the riot act. Because I was going to dominate that class. And that's what we're seeing here, is the confusion starts. And who's going to run the show? David's gone. He fled the country. Absalom's dead. I wonder who's going to... Immediately, the chaos ensues. Remember this when you leave your children at home alone. We learned a while ago with our girls that I not only had to put Christian in charge, I had to make sure that the other two knew she was the one in charge. Nobody else gets to lead an insurrection and a rebellion. I don't want to come back here and find Christian tied up in duct tape. It's Christian's in charge. So it's funny, you be out and you get the phone call and you answer it and say, hello, and this quiet voice on the other end says, Dad, is it okay if we have ice cream? Who is this, and why are you whispering? It's child number 2 or 3, and they're whispering because they've already asked and they've been denied permission, so they're trying to go over the authority's head. And anarchy. So who's going to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you bring back the king? 11. So King David sent Zadok and Abiathar the priest, saying, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king, to his very house? You are my brethren, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? God, do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab. So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah as the heart of one man. So they sent this word to the king, return, you and all your servants. And the king returned and came to the Jordan. And Judah came to Gilgal to go and meet the king and escort the king across the Jordan. So he appeals to them, and you'll remember that Amasa was related to Joab and Abishai. Abishai is the one who's always saying, can I kill him? Can I kill him? He's that guy. That guy needs to die. Could I go kill him? He's always the one that's anxious to do that. Joab is the one who just moves to action. Just, okay, that needs to die, and he kills it immediately. Takes care of Absalom, takes care of the things that he perceives need to be done. Apparently, this is a family trait. You can see who these guys are. Okay? Amasa is of the same family. These are the guys that if they were alive today, they'd always be playing with guns, explosives, driving around four-wheel drive trucks, rednecks. These are those guys. Okay? When it comes time for battle and action, they're the first on the line. Let's go. I'm ready. Can we go? Can we fight? Can we? So now, Amasa has been the one who Absalom put in place over his army, and he led the battle against Joab and Abishai. So there's a strange sort of family thing going on here. And David reaches out to Amasa and says, all of Judah is my blood. I am related to all of you. And why is it that now that I'm out of the country, somebody hasn't sent to me and brought me back into my place? He's pushy, but also questioning at the same time. He's pushy, saying, that's my throne. Why haven't you guys come back to get me and put me on that throne? But at the same time, he's also saying, are you guys going to? Is this a period of transition that are you going a different direction, or are you going to restore me to where I belong? Is what he's saying. So they get that message, and they come to meet him, and I've lost my place once again. So, 16. And Shimei, you remember this guy? The son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Baharaim, hurried to come down with the men of Judah to meet the King David. He was the guy that was yelling and cursing and throwing rocks. And Abishai said, I'll go take care of that guy. Why does that guy still have his head? That's his attitude. He comes out to hurry to meet David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons, and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. Now Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan, and he said to the king, do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on that day, and that the Lord the king left Jerusalem, and the king should take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore, here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, shall not Shimei be put to death for this? Because he cursed the Lord's anointed. So Abishai's attitude doesn't change at all. And David said, what have I to do with you, the son of Zeruiah? This is the second time David has said this to him, that you should be adversaries to me today. Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel? Therefore the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king swore to him. So David showing that graciousness that you and I have experienced. And we've experienced it when we gave our lives to Christ and submitted to him. But we've experienced this even more as Christians when the temptation of our heart begins to pull us away, and we know, oh man, I'm having this draw into conduct that is not pleasing to my Father, and we follow that desire, and we rebel against him, and then we're filled with guilt, and we return to him and say, I have wronged you. And he is gracious and forgiving and kind. That's the attitude of the Lord, and you see it here in the Old Testament, and that's why I'm so displeased when people try to give God this Old Testament character and attribute. Oh, the God of the Old Testament is judgmental and wrathful and unforgiving and has no grace. I don't see that at all. I see an extreme graciousness. And David here, who is definitely a child of God, is very reflective of that. He sees the genuine repentance of Shimei and forgives him for that. In 24, that whole frame of mind continues. Now Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. He had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes, from the day the king departed until he returned in peace. So it was, when he came to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, my lord, O my king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all my father's house were put to death before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore what right have I still to cry out any more to the king? So the king said to him, why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, you and Ziba divide the land. And Mephibosheth said to the king, rather let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house. You'll recall that in the beginning of this whole rebellion, it was told to David that Mephibosheth was looking to find himself a place of power. That in David's leaving, back up, Mephibosheth is a direct relation to Saul and Jonathan. And David has extended him grace, brought him into his own household, and said, this man will eat at my table. And he gave Mephibosheth all of Saul's property, everything that belonged to Saul. As a descendant of Saul and Jonathan, David honored the relationship that he had with Jonathan and said, all that was theirs now belongs to you. He then takes the servant Ziba and gives all of the land into the care of Ziba and says, Mephibosheth will stay at my table, and he'll eat here, and everything that is produced in Saul's land will be the belonging and income to Mephibosheth. Here, he has this situation where somebody comes and tells him that Mephibosheth is part of the rebellion. David there gives all of the property over to Ziba and says, if that guy's going to forsake me that way, then he doesn't get anything. And he gives all of the property to the servant and says, it's yours. Now, when Mephibosheth comes back and explains, David does something interesting, because the covenants and agreements that are made are very, very important to the Lord. And you'll see that. We're going to see shortly that the Lord repays the nation of Israel with a famine for 3 years because Saul broke his word and forsook an oath that had been taken by the nation of Israel. David makes an oath and gives everything over to Ziba. So now when he's trying to restore this, he doesn't just snatch everything away from that man and give it all back to Mephibosheth. He says, let's divide it. You know, everything went awry here. We had an insurrection, and we thought that the kingdom was gone, and I moved stuff around, and now people think that, Ziba thinks he owns all of this land. Let's divide it. Everyone will come out in a good way. And I like the attitude of Mephibosheth, who just says, I don't care about any of those things. If I can sit at your table, that's all the inheritance that I want. You think about that in light of my position and your position in the kingdom. The meek shall inherit the earth. And some go, hooray, we get to own the earth. Who cares, man? When you have the prospect of sitting at the king's table, they can have the earth. For real. I mean, if he wants us to be part of caring for it and tending it and experiencing it and ruling over it, then praise God. But just the fact that I get to bend my knee underneath his table, I'd be content to stay right there. Just to stay in his presence and worship him, And that's what I hear in Mephibosheth is he doesn't have a heart for things of this earth. He has a heart for the Lord. He wants to sit and be fed. I'm always blessed when I see faces at Sunday morning and then Sunday evening and then Wednesday evening. I recognize the heart of the one who just wants to sit at the king's table and be fed. Just give me the word. I like that. In 31, Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rogelim and went across the Jordan with the king to escort him across the Jordan. Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed at Mahanaim, for he was a very rich man. The king said to Barzillai, come across with me, and I will provide for you while you are with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said to the king, how long have I to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and the bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be of further burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king, and why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please, let your servant turn back again, that I may die in my own city near the grave of my father and mother. But there is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you. And the king answered, Chimham shall go across over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now, whatever you request of me, I will do for you." Then all the people went over the Jordan. And when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him and returned to his own place. This man, you'll recall, sent out great provision. The donkeys arrive, loaded down with food. And while they're at Mahanaim, all kinds of very refreshing nourishment and provision comes from this man. And David, as soon as he's returning, Barzillai comes out to meet him, and David is just so blessed by this was, you consider it, Absalom has moved the whole of Israel against David. Barzillai at that moment stands up and says, "Forget all of them, I'm with the king." That was an act of treason in Absalom's kingdom at that moment. For him to go and take care of David, he was risking his own neck. Barzillai at that moment. That's great faith to me. It's hard, isn't it, to stand up in the crowd that's all going one direction and say, "No, I'm going the right way. I'm going one direction." I don't care for a lot of the political talk shows very much. It just, politics it's politics. It's nuts. Just as you think the man is going the right direction, he turns around and proves to you that he's a man and he's fully capable of failure and lies. It's politics. I saw yesterday an interview with a legislator from Vermont. This conservative program had tried to question him. He had been responsible in Vermont just in the past few months for changing the laws in such a way that the maximum amount that they could give a child rapist was 5 months. Some of these guys were child rapists previously convicted. A Vermont judge gave him no time on his second conviction. No time at all. He got probation, 60 days for other guys. And at the same time, they are rapidly moving, same man, responsible for changing the laws about gender identity. Say, here's this lawmaker who's making it possible for pedophiles to be set free, and at the same time passing laws that make being a pervert a protected status. It was nice to see this man in the interview. They had sent him requests and said, "We'd like to interview on this, just like to know your point of view, just like to understand why it is that you're doing this. You're setting child rapists free and making protected status for the perverts in your community. That just seems to be very controversial. Why are you doing that?" And he refused to respond. So they left New York City and went to Vermont and just walked right into his lunch and stepped right up to his table and just said, "Hi, we're from this conservative talk show, and you've refused to respond to us, so we're here in person and just wanted to know why it is that you're doing these things." And you should have seen the room erupt. People stood up and just started accusing. He just asked a simple question. Just explain yourself. Please, we're from a conservative talk show. Please explain yourself. Why are you doing this? Here's your moment to respond. And the guy just went totally flustered and started, making all kinds of excuses. And by the end of it, he had like 20 people around him just hurling insults at him, saying all kinds of negative things, and I mean vicious negative things. And he just kept saying, we're just trying to understand your position. Could you just please explain, what it is that you're trying to do? I like the fact that guy walked right into that hornet's nest and just said, "Please explain this to us. We don't understand." And we just clearly, you're an educated man, and here you are, you're an elected official, and you're the one responsible for making these laws. There must be some thought process in your mind. Please, could you just explain that to us? That's what he just remained that calm. I liked that. Stepped right. I mean, there were people shoving him and trying to grab his microphone and calling him names, and he just kept asking the question very simply, very level-headed. Barzillai goes right in against the crowd. All of Israel is headed one direction. David has a small cluster of people. They're running away. And this man goes, you know what? My king is going to need provision. And he heads right out to do that. The world is going to head one direction. That old cliche, any dead fish can float downstream. It's effortless to go along with the current, along with the flow, along with the world. It's difficult to stand up and say, no, I know what the right thing to do is here, and then to just plow your way through into doing that. That totally blessed me and encouraged me to do the same thing, because, it's the embarrassment, the pressure causes you to want to go with the world, doesn't it? There's a current there. And I like his whole statement about I'm past the years of enjoying things like that. I like that about him. Just, the world is basically meaningless. I'm just waiting to enter heaven is his attitude. There's a great picture in this man. I want the Lord's purposes in my life. I'm about seeing. I've lost the flavor of the world. When he says I can't even tell good and bad, he can tell good and bad, can he, spiritually? He knew what to do in the case of David, but when he's he's literally saying, taste this, see if this tastes good. He's saying, I can't tell. The things of the world that have so much flavor, as far as I'm concerned, they're tasteless. I can't tell you if it's good or bad. I have no desire for those things. Music, enjoyment, dance, party, it's all meaningless. Can't see good, can't hear good, it's just all of those earthly experiences, they're all gone for me. I'd like to just stay close to the grave. That's what he says. You think about this picture. My parents died, and they're buried over here, and I'd like to just stay close to that. Why? Because I'm going to die pretty quick, and I don't want somebody to have to ship me back here. You think about the spiritual picture that's involved in the sky. I think we all need that T-shirt, don't we? Stay close to the grave. Just, die to yourself, man. Just the world should be tasteless, meaningless. It should all sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. The whole world should look just very fuzzy and out of focus. Yeah. The only things that you should really be able to see are probably right in here, Get the word real close to your eyes, and that's all you need. I like this guy's attitude. There's a great artistic, interpretive picture in this man's life that I've always enjoyed. First time I read it, I just really knew the Lord was saying, no, examine this man. See who he is. See what his heart is about. You could just read past and go, yeah, old dude, right, whatever. Just move on, next. I like him. I like what he's about. I like his attitude. 40, now the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half of the people of Israel. Just then all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan? So all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is a close relative of ours. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we ever eaten at the king's expense, or has he given us any gift? The men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 shares in the king. Therefore, we also have more right to David than you. Why then do you despise us? We were not the first to advise bringing back our king. Were we not the first to advise bringing back our king? Yet the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. So, heated debate. Now, we're going to see quickly that this results in a division, but realistically, this division began much earlier. You'll recall that at Saul's death, David was anointed king and ruled over Judah for 7 years before Israel embraced him. So there's already a division in the land. There's already a north and south. There's already family rights and heritage involved. Everybody's choosing sides long before this occasion occurs. There's animosity. And so when it comes to this moment, it just boils over. Who do you guys think you are? Who do you think you are? And back and forth it goes until we come to verse 1 of chapter 20. There happened to be a rebel. There's always one, isn't there? Oh, why do these guys show up? Why? There always is. Whose name was Will Cass. Doesn't say that, does it? But that's the way it is often. Whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, "We have no share in David, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel." How stupid. So every man of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah, from the Jordan as far as Jerusalem, remained loyal to the king. So the division occurs physically. The people of Israel are divided. Judah against the nation of Israel, the remaining tribes. So in 3, now David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 women, his concubines, whom he had left to keep the house, and put them in seclusion, and supported them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up to the day of their death, living in widowhood. That despicable act. David was not supposed to have multiple wives or these concubines. That was forbidden by the Lord. But David had done these things. And the Lord, in that, wants David to be responsible. Now, it's a weird sort of thing. To put it in a realistic frame of mind, in modern terminology, if a man is married and he also has a mistress that he's having an adulterous affair with, if she becomes pregnant, it is that man's responsibility to take care of that woman and that child. Biblically, socially, it is his responsibility. He should do that. It's wrong. It's not, you understand? It's not the desire of the Lord that a guy have, 2 wives or have a wife and another woman this way, but if he's going to have these relationships, he's responsible to them. And so David crosses the line and disobeys the Lord and multiplies wives to himself and has concubines. Now they've been defiled. Absalom went into them and had sexual relationships with them in order to show the nation of Israel that he was serious about overthrowing David's kingdom. Everybody instantly knew. You'll recall, it's disgraceful, but you'll recall that he set up the tent on the housetop, and so that the nation of Israel could witness the fact that he was taking these women in there and having relations with them. It's a really sick, despicable thing. And now that they've been defiled this way, David comes back to the house and he says, gals, I'm going to have to move you out. I'm going to take care of you, but us having a relationship is over. Defiled by Absalom, he puts them away, and they live in a state of widowhood for the remainder of their lives. And the king said to Amasa, "Assemble the men of Judah for me within 3 days, and be present here yourself." So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he delayed no longer than the set time which David had appointed him. So he's doing his job well and efficiently. Now this is the Amasa that Absalom had chosen as captain over his armies. In chapter 17, verse 25, as Absalom begins this insurrection and rebellion against David, he assembles his armies and takes Amasa and puts him as captain over those forces. David honors that and just says, you're a man who has leadership qualities and abilities. I'm going to put you in place. You're already there. I'm not going to try to rock the boat. To me, that's a really strange move. And, from a natural sense of things, to take the man who was most diametrically opposed to you, militarily looking to destroy you, and make him in charge of what's going on, that seems like a strange move. Abraham Lincoln had a public heckler who despised Lincoln, hated him. Every speaking engagement that Lincoln had, this man tried to be present at it and publicly heckle Abraham Lincoln. He would shout things from the crowd, shout things that were true about Abraham Lincoln and his failures and his looks and his appearance and his conduct. Just deface Abraham Lincoln in every way possible. When it came time for Abraham Lincoln to choose his cabinet members, he took that man and put him in a key position and role. Gave him a place of authority inside the United States government. And Abraham Lincoln was questioned heavily on that and criticized frequently for it. And when he was asked why, Abraham Lincoln said, a lot of men, admire me, basically, is what he said. This man has no admiration for me, so the things that he does are going to be genuine. He's not going to be doing it just because I'm Abraham Lincoln. He's going to be performing his work inside the government without that whole fear of men thing. He's not a man pleaser. He's not there to please Abraham Lincoln. He's there to do the job properly. That's a level of grace that's really, it's mind-numbing when you think about it. When Abraham Lincoln was shot, that man was present and did everything he could to preserve Abraham Lincoln's life. And as Abraham Lincoln lay dead, laid out, he was heard to say, it was publicly recorded, that Abraham Lincoln was the most beautiful person he had ever met in his life. His heart had been changed by the grace that was extended to him. I think that there's a similar thing going on here with Amasa. David recognizes, hey, I'm not going to try and tear the troops up or whatever it is, and this guy does a good job, and then he even proves. He said, you got 3 days, you got to assemble, and he did it before the allotted time was even completed. Reports back for duty, yes, sir, here we are. Things are in order, just as you requested. It's interesting to see that type of reaction. And in 6, David said to Abishai, now Sheba the son of Bichri will do us more harm than Absalom. Take our Lord's servants and pursue him, lest he find for himself fortified cities and escape us. So Joab's men and the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the mighty men went out after him, and they went out of Jerusalem to pursue Sheba the son of Bichri. When they were at the large stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa came before them. Now Joab was dressed in battle armor. On it was a belt with a sword fastened in its sheath at his hip. And as he was going forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, are you healthy, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword that was in Joab's hand, and he struck him with it in the stomach, and his entrails poured out on the ground, and he did not strike him again. Thus he died. Then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba the son of Bichri. Meanwhile, one of Joab's men stood near Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, follow Joab. So they meet in this occasion to go and pursue Sheba, and as they're preparing to go, Joab apparently already has it in mind, and there's in every translation it indicates that this sword just fell out. There was within the culture the idea that men fought with their right hand, that was where they sheathed their sword on their left side, and they fought with their sword in their right hand. And this sword falls out, and he takes Amasa by the beard as though he's going to kiss him, and kills him dead. Now, there's a mockery in the whole thing that's really sinister. Taking the sword as it falls out, it would appear that this may have been like a whole setup on Joab's part. Even dropping the sword in such a way that Amasa doesn't think that the sword being out of its sheath is a threat. It's possible that it was coincidental, but there seems to be an implication that Joab's plan is, oh, whoops, fumble with my sword, and as I'm picking it up, I greet you. And his question is, so are you feeling well? How you feeling? And just as he's answering, oh, I feel great, whooshing, he lays the guy's stomach open. That's pretty sinister on Joab's part. Not just that he comes up on the guy and kills him, but he does it as he's asking him a question about how his health is. How's your health? As I cause your innards to spill out. Not so good right now. Feeling a little woozy? You know, really a twisted sort of guy, Joab. You know, hears that Absalom is hanging in the tree. Really? I know how to take care of that. Hears that Amasa is on the road. You think about it. Joab and Abishai were the ones that had to defend David against this guy. And they are directly related to him. They're directly related to Amasa. So, when it comes time for the question, what do we do with Amasa? Joab's not going to extend the grace that David did. Joab's going to take care of business. And slices him open. You know, there's Meanwhile, we'll read 11 again. Meanwhile, one of Joab's men stood near Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, follow Joab. But Amasa wallowed in his blood in the middle of the highway, and when the men saw that all the people stood still, he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him. When he saw that everyone who came upon him halted, when he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. So apparently there's still a little bit of life. There's the indication that he doesn't have to strike Amasa twice. He puts him down in such a way that it's the finishing blow. He's killed him, but he's wallowing in his blood. So everybody that's trying to pass by is just stunned by this picture of a guy who is in his death throes. So they just make the decision to just pull him off the road, cover him up, and move on. Really a very sinister move on the part of Joab. In 14, and he went through all the tribes of Israel to able to Beth Mitchah and all the Beerites. So they were gathered together and also went after Sheba. Then they came and besieged him in Abel and Beth Michah, and they cast up a siege mound against the city, and it stood by the rampart, and all the people who were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman cried out from the city, Here, here, please say to Joab, come nearby that I may speak with him, speak with you. When he had come near to her, the woman said, Are you Joab? And he answered, I am. Then she said to him, Here are the words of your maidservant. And he answered, I am listening. So she spoke, saying, They used to talk in former times, saying, They shall surely seek guidance at Abel, and so they would end disputes. I am among the peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why should you swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? She's talking about herself and all of the innocent people inside the city. And she's saying, people used to come here, or used to at least say that they should come here in order to seek wisdom and settle disputes. So shouldn't we be able to seek wisdom and settle this dispute right here? No need for innocent people to die. I live inside the city. I don't want to die. There are other innocent, people inside this city. They don't want to die. Can't we settle this matter? And Joab is anxious to hear what she has to say. So Joab answered and said, Far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not so, but a man from the mountains of Ephraim, Sheba, is the son of Bichri by name. He has raised his hand against the king, against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. So the woman said to Joab, Watch, his head will be thrown to you over the wall. Will volley for serve? Then the woman, in her wisdom, went to all the people, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. Then he blew the trumpet, and they withdrew from the city, every man to his tent. So Joab returned to the king at Jerusalem. So, while the hearts of Israel are divided, while you see Israel wanting to go their direction and Judah is strong in their intent towards David, this rebellion has begun by one man. Now that they're having to pay for that rebellion, the people at least have enough sense to listen to reason and say, I don't know if this is such a good idea, following after the rebellion. And they make the decision to get rid of the man who led the rebellion. Proverbs tells us to flog the mocker, and the simple will learn by it. This is a thing that very often is necessary. The mocker will be present, running his mouth. If he's punished, then the simple who are following him will learn. That's some of the, all of my struggles in school. I was that mocker, as I described earlier, taking over classrooms. The best teacher I ever had, the best I ever did in school was in 8th grade. And a man named Kim Reese didn't put up with anything from me. He was a Marine Corps drill instructor who had been in Vietnam, and right in the very beginning, he didn't come crashing down on me unnecessarily. He just didn't put up with anything. And he had all kinds of intimidation was his key role, I was I'm sitting in class with my math book on my desk one time, and I've got a spy novel inside that math book, and I'm looking like I'm very attentive to class, but I'm reading my own book, right? Well, I finally get so absorbed in what I'm reading that I lose track of everything that's going on around me. And Kim Reese walks over to my desk, and as he comes, he lowers his voice so that he gets quieter and quieter. I don't notice that he's walking right up on me, and he snatches that book out of my hand and launches it across the room. I mean, just say bang, and it hits the wall on the other side of the room. And he says, "Are you with us now, Mr. Cass?" It was really hard to be distracted for the remainder of the day, He put up with nothing. He he was relentless. And I was an A student that year for the only time in my entire attendance in school. Started in, incompletes. It was closed classroom. We never left the room. Same teacher for all subjects. So, he writes, like the second week in, I'm already missing a ton of assignments. I come in, my name is in bold print on his chalkboard, Will Cass. Assignments due. And he's got all of my assignments written. I got 32 students in this classroom, man. I got to come in every day, and my assignments, my name, and my overdue assignments are posted. And that's how we began every day. He'd come in and say, one by one, do you have this for me? No. And he wouldn't just say, do you have any of that for me? No. He'd say, do you have this assignment for me? No. And he'd have the date on it, like when it was due. That's now like 15 days overdue. Do you have this one? No. Well, that's like 11 days overdue. Do you have this one? He did it every morning. Every single morning until that was right down to, I never cut my name off the board, but I hovered at 1 or 2, you know what I'm saying? The guy, he brought me right through. I had great grades. I had no time to be a mocker in his class. And I'll tell you what, the rest of the class was doing brilliantly. Why? Because they saw how he treated me. I was the mocker. They all knew it. That was my reputation. He didn't put up with it, so none of them were going to try anything. It was a yes sir, no sir class from beginning to end. So this guy, you take the head off in Sheba and throw it over the wall. Anybody who was thinking about following that whole idea, their dreams of rebellion are over. You don't want to follow that kind of example. 23, then Joab was over all the army of Israel. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiab, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of revenue, and Jehoshaphat, the son of Heliab, was recorder. Sheva was scribe. Zadok, Abiathar were priests. Ira, Jerite was the chief minister under David. So the cabinet of David's court. David has to deal with very serious issues all throughout his time and reign. And having his heart in line with the Lord is the only thing that allows him to be the leader that he is. He's human. He's a complete failure when you look at who he is. David's life is such that realistically what he should be known as is a shepherd, a lust-filled, murdering adulterer who, from the eyes of the world, is a coward who would flee before his son, who's a crybaby when Absalom dies, who shows a lack of leadership in defining his military when it comes to the men that are going to lead it. Joab has to take charge and get rid of the rebels. We're going to see, you think about even the small details inside the fact that David was at home enjoying himself and partying when Uriah the Hittite and the other men were out to battle. Today, what do we know David as? Well, he's the lineage of Jesus Christ. He was the greatest king that ever reigned inside Israel. He was this magnificent. What made all of that? Rather than being known by his failures, why was he known by success? The reason he was known by success is the Lord was his success. It's easy to fall into that place where the voice of your enemy is all that you hear. You're a failure. Yes, I am. You're completely unmotivated. Yes, I am. You're a slug, man. Look at you. Yes, I am. you look at the humanness of you, and we stink right out loud, don't we? We're so human, it's pathetic. And yet, we are more than conquerors. Jesus Christ in our lives can pull us beyond that. And I don't just mean that he can change how we're viewed. I mean, he can literally change us. So that, yes, there is human frailty. Yes, you may look like a buffoon, but at the same time, Jesus Christ is capable of raising us up out of that and making us useful vessels to him. I just can't even believe that. I can't believe that the Lord does those sorts of things. He takes human beings and puts himself inside them, and then goes and distributes himself out to others through us. It's been suggested that's why he uses cracked pots, because then we leak out all over everyone else. So it's okay to be a cracked pot. Useful to the Lord. Let's stand and pray. God is gracious. Even when you read a verse wrong, right, Steve? Father, we thank you very much for the way that you would use even us. You're so good. Lord, I pray that you would use us. This is a hurting, dying world that has been divided against you. There are many who follow Lucifer, follow the world, like the children of Israel followed Sheba. Lord, I pray that you would use us. Use us like you did David to free the world from its sinfulness and its rebellion against you. Lord, I pray that you would continue to refine us and change us. We ourselves need to be freed from that rebellion. It's easy for our hearts to go along with the crowd. I pray that you would empower us with the strength of your Holy Spirit, so that we would find this world very tasteless, and that your word would somehow miraculously be our appetite. Fill us with a desire for you and your purposes. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys.